Hello, everybody. Steve Cobb from #Sports. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your patience with the registration and everything. But we're going to get underway pretty soon. For those of you who don't know, #Sports is an annual innovation conference, and it's a thought leadership platform that explores the trends and technologies happening in and around sports, especially at the convergence of media, sponsorship, content, and culture. And over the next 3 days, today and tomorrow here at the Time Center, and then day 3 at the Microsoft Technology Center, we've put together a very robust thought leadership program featuring over 150 executives, athletes, influencers, and ultimately thought leaders who are shaping the future of the fan experience. And it's a critical time with these different platforms that are emerging and entire models of our industry that are undergoing disruption and innovation. And so, I just want to thank you all for coming here. You obviously understand the importance of this. And we're going to have over 50 sessions. The way this is going to work is we're going to get started with our opening keynote. We're going to have a few sessions here on the main stage, and then we're going to split, and we'll have more sessions here on the main stage, and then we're going to go and start to open programming on our Innovate stage, which is downstairs. I also want to take some time to thank our partners, particularly our Platinum and our Gold partners, Microsoft, Telescope, Genius Sports, Omnigon, Sport Radar, and Verizon Digital Media Services, as well as all of our supporting partners. So if we could get just a quick round of applause for them helping to make this happen. So without any further ado, I just want to jump right into it. We've got an amazing kickoff to this event. First speaker needs no introduction, former NBA commissioner, avid sports tech investor, and ultimately sports media visionary. David Stern is going to be joining us, as well as Dan Porter, who has an unbelievable resume, built and sold Draw Something, just a little app you might have heard of. Also, former head of digital for WME IMG, and also now the CEO and founder of Overtime, which you'll hear more about. And then also, the conversation is going to be led by the one and only Jason Gay, Wall Street Journal sports columnist, and this overall hilarious guy. And I'm just going to get off the stage, and we're just going to flow session to session, and we'll kick things off. So if we can get a round of applause for our opening keynote.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have water, so we're good. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jason Gay, and I'll jump right into it with a question for Mr. Stern. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of things going on in the digital world, but is there anything you can do about the Knicks?
You're so imaginative. I'm taking the fifth. I think that, stay tuned. Let's see how the French 6'3" guard, maybe 6'6", works out.
Yeah.
And there seems to be coming together a nucleus of a team.
Yeah, okay. I want to believe.
Keep believing that. They're only one player away. That's what I tell every new owner.
That's right, one player away.
Unfortunately, it's Michael Jordan in his prime.
I want to get to what you guys are doing with Overtime, but before we get there, let's talk a little bit about the broad media landscape out there. We're still in an era of big money contracts with television, in the billions for a desirable product like the NBA, NFL, big-time college sports. And yet at the same time, we keep hearing about cost cutting and layoffs at ESPN and people cutting the cord. There are folks that think that the next wave is just going to be digital companies like an Amazon or a Facebook. And then there are some folks that say it's a bubble. Tell me what's fiction, what's reality with regard to sports and television, how volatile the environment is out there.
It's not a bubble because those new companies are suddenly realizing, post all of the deals that have just been made for the professional sports leagues, that they need sports programming.
Yeah.
So whether, the women's, the hockey league and the soccer league and the Amazon deal with the NFL,
right,
and Facebook doing all kinds of interesting little deals, whether it's the Golden State Warriors practice or the NBA's G League. So all of those people are going to be lined up for the next round of deals. In fact, we used to talk about that before the last round, and the people who understood it were Disney and Time Warner, and so they entered into long-term deals across. But it's beginning to happen. Enter the millennials, and these are not unrelated issues because Major League Baseball is trying desperately to shorten its games. The NFL is talking about different configurations of their telecasts so that they will appeal to people who have maybe shorter attention spans, which is where Dan and his millennials come in.
Well, that's, a huge part of what you guys are doing, and I keep hearing, forget about cord cutting, that millennial audiences don't even process sports in the way that we all once did. The idea of watching a game, turn it on in the first quarter, watch the second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, A to Z, doesn't really happen anymore. Young audiences are multitasking, they have multiple sources, social media and so on. How do you work with an audience that's as seemingly fickle as that?
Go ahead, Dan.
One of the things I would say that is interesting is, so like for me as an older person, I love my team and related to the city where I'm from, Philadelphia. And
are you trusting the process?
I'm trusting the process as long as it involves Darryl Dawkins, Moses Malone, and Dr. J. And I think that, but I think what we find is we experiment in a lot of different ways, is that it's very personality driven, and in fact, what we consider these entrenched loyalties that you grow up in this town and this is your team and you care about your team and you want to see them, is very different in a world where I can directly follow any type of player on any type of platform. And so I think even when we looked at kind of an emerging market, which was how do you get young people and get a young audience, you show them themselves and their peers. And we said, we'll show you your school and the schools around you and everything else like that. And kind of what they wanted to see was the best players more. I could, show LaMelo Ball all day and drive more views from that than covering 1,000 high schools or anything else like that. So you've got these people who have these platforms and building these kind of full stories around them, I think is a super interesting element of it. And then again, what we're doing, esports, people are, I think, open to not traditionally, these are the only sports that matter and this is the only way to consume them.
David, what interested you from the investor side of this and what they're doing?
Well, in Overtime, this is an entirely new proposition. Nobody is going to pay large amounts for high school sports. There tend to be community activities. But what Dan has envisioned with Overtime was if you dig deep, you find out that everybody knows who the great high school basketball players are. And they know where the tournaments are, what's going on, what's happening in Las Vegas, the summer opportunities. And collectively, and even ESPN does the top 100 high school players, but they don't gather the video or similar data to go with what they are trying to do. And Overtime said, okay, that's it. We're going to do that because people like to curate and adopt all of their own videos, and these young men and women know exactly what's going on and where the greatest players are. And so I think that Dan has found himself an opportunity here, especially, what young viewers are not watching as much as they used to. They tune in and then they go away. They don't, and because that's true of all viewers actually. If you look at the viewership numbers, people are watching. People are actually maybe watching, sitting in front of a TV set more, but they're watching for shorter periods of time, and that's averaging in the millennials who don't want to sit and watch even the best games because they don't understand how good the games really are. They're not going to give you 2.5 hours.
if you look at Overtime, there seems to be a lot of value placed on authenticity, on sort of an intimate look at young players and have a feeling you're watching, people and that's a hard trick to pull off sometimes, I think, for developers, especially developers who are older than their target audience. And how do you make it feel real without slicking it up?
Because this is, consumer-generated video. The players are telling their fans, their groups, take video of me.
Yeah.
Because I want it to make sure it gets posted to Overtime,
Yeah.
and I want to make sure I can get the opportunity to curate my own Overtime, compilation of videos. And so it's and then suddenly the regional sports networks have expressed a relatively strong interest. Sports New York?
SNY, yeah. Sports New
SNY
York.
is going to, have a television show.
And will that be like
with these. That was like not contemplated
Right.
at the beginning, but now we're in discussions with other regional sports networks because this is a relatively inexpensive source of programming for them.
Sure.
And the producers are looking for inexpensive ways. That's why they're talking about using, unmanned television cameras, a la, I see Milton Lee here from, what are you from, Milt? Keymotion, that's it. That's a plug. But you basically, you just, set the camera.
Yeah.
It's a computer. It's like the Tesla of television.
Okay.
Because they don't want to spend money on the production. Not that they don't want to, they can't.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. That's why Overtime is going to be important.
Dan, are there any complications with regard to, because this is user-generated content, because there are young people involved who are, theoretically under the NCAA rules? Are there any complications with regard to that and showing that kind of content?
There's no complications. I think what we find is, in fact, most of the teams and the coaches and the players want to be seen.
Yeah.
They want exposure. Most of the good stuff actually comes from club sports, AU, club lacrosse, stuff like that, because you get a number of superstars on any one team.
Right. Nike camp, I think there were some showcases that I saw.
Yeah, Nike Camp, Peach Jam, all of those things. And, I think from my era, it's like you say high school sports, and I'm asleep by the time you got to the SN sports. And yet when you watch it, when you see the stuff that's happening like at Dykeman, at all these parks around New York, it's actually pretty epic. And there's something about the immediacy of being able to get under the net with a camera, hold up your phone or something else like that creates, it's not just the content, but the way it's created and captured. It just feels different. It feels less produced. And I think people are looking for that level of authenticity. And I think the younger viewers, they're thinking like, I love LeBron, but he's not like me. He's like way above me. Whereas like these kids are a heartbeat away from being me in a way.
They're recognizable.
If we monetize it, we're going to buy Dan a jacket.
Yeah.
You mentioned LeBron James.
A blazer, you mean?
I'm right. A blue blazer. We think
Bar mitzvah one doesn't fit anymore.
You mentioned LeBron, and he's one of many elite athletes who seems to be taking more control of their content. He has his platform with uninterrupted. Numerous players are putting themselves out there with regard to social media, Twitter, Snapchat, and so on. Are we just sort of scratching the surface in ways in which athletes can sort of be empowered this way?
If you're have some time to think about it, and I do, what we're seeing is a shift with the Players Tribune and the individual player. With LeBron, I don't know, he has 24 or 25 million, maybe 35 million. And I saw an article talking about how much when he puts a couple of songs from his playlist on,
they go up the
it's
chart.
worth X.
Yeah.
And I think that there's this movement afoot that is seeing more movement to the players' brands.
Yeah.
Working with the leagues, because the leagues actually, it's one of those things. It's actually a good thing, because the more you're out there, the more interested people become and the more likely they are either to attend or watch on television.
Yeah.
but it's happening.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things, interesting things happening.
I would say also in that it's like weirdly, I love reading like old stuff about Brooklyn. I don't know why old is like an adjective in every sentence that I use. But you know, they have these stories where it's like the guys go and they knock on the guy from the Brooklyn Dodgers door and his wife said, oh, he's playing ball, he's at the ballpark, he's not here. And there's like this incredible immediacy around kind of who your players are and your teams. And then we go away from that. And then I think once kind of any social platform opens the door to let you back in to experience kind of your players off the court and stuff like that, it's almost impossible to ever close that door again. And I think it brings people closer to the teams and the fans.
David, I wanted to ask you about social media and the NBA, because this was all, you know, bubbling up when you were commissioner, and the idea of maybe not cracking down and policing really hard, you know, content that gets put up on Twitter and Facebook and so on. It seems to have really benefited the league because, you know, we've created stars through it. It's a way to monitor everything that's happening, but that's not always an easy choice for leagues.
No, the choice was easy. I think it was very much driven by Adam Silver, who felt strongly, and I agree with him, but to say this is distributed, and we want to be distributed. We don't want to be walled off. And once that was adopted as a policy, there is a notion of saying to a player, this is the same as walking out of the locker room and giving an interview in front of a television camera.
Yeah.
It took a while for that to sort of click in, because certain players thought they were just sort of engaging in a private conversation and discussing certain activities that they probably shouldn't discuss. But I think the players have been great, and I think that Shaq putting 2 tickets under a bench at, you know, at Madison and Vine did more to sort of invigorate Twitter rather than people telling them what I had for breakfast and I'm now at the George Washington Bridge going to New Jersey. So it really is tremendous for, I think, the leagues, and that's why leagues sort of make it easy for their players to do that.
Can you talk a little bit about the power of television for sport, just broadly? You know, I think some folks in this room might not be aware of, you know, many years ago, CBS was airing playoff games on tape delay. That ended, of course, in the mid-'80s, and we went through this giant renaissance, of course, with Bird and Magic and Jordan after that. Is it still the most powerful force in terms of?
The simple answer is yes. That's why everybody is trying to come up with the next sport. Look, talk about the crowded marketplace today and what's coming. So we're going to have rugby, you know, in the U.S. There are different leagues and different opportunities. We've got drone racing. And
I laugh, but I shouldn't.
No, you should not laugh.
I shouldn't laugh.
And most of all, we're coming up on esports, where I was just reading the PricewaterhouseCoopers 5-year media projection, and they said that between 2013 and 2016, the esports revenues tripled or quadrupled, and they expect it to triple in the next 5 years. So there's something going on out there where people are seriously trying to find out how they can have sports on their air, on their whatever digital media approach you take, because that attracts viewers. Live sports, you know, if we ever get back to some normalcy, the cable news outlets won't get the big bump that they've been getting, but it's either news or sports. That's it. And I think that sports is the stronger and more continuous of the group. So we're sitting in a sweet spot. And I guess I've always said sports has always been the canary in the mine, and it always deals with new technologies. So we started with over-the-air, we went to cable, we went to satellite, we went to digital, we went to social media, and it always leads the way. No matter what new media approach is being taken, sports leads the way.
At the same time, though, I have to wonder, for all the change that's out there, many sports broadcasts are still quite conventional and recognizable from a generation ago. You got a couple of folks in a booth, maybe 3 people in a booth. You have the horizontal shot of the court, graphics on the screen. Dan, what is the next phase? What is sports television going to look like in a generation from now, if you had to guess?
I would say, I mean, if you look at esports and you look at Twitch and the ability to have chat and command line controls and that, I think even if you look at how social media combines graphics and text over video because they know people are watching without the sound on.
Right.
But I think, as long as it's on television, all of the second screen action is going to be mostly on your phone.
Doesn't have to be. In other words, what Mark Cuban did, or for some experiment on the Fox Regional Sports Network in Dallas, was to ask a company like LiveLike to, instead of doing just VR, just do a Maverick sort of man cave projection on a television set and manipulate the screen in such a way that the statistics are up on the screen and that the suite,
real time,
the suite in which you're sitting under this VR approach is a Dallas-themed suite.
Gotcha.
And it looks like it'll roll out to other regional sports channels. Beyond that, you're going to wind up with fans sitting with their either their phones or their iPads looking at the statistics.
Yeah.
And a company like Shot Tracker is going to give you the ability to second guess the coach on a continuous basis. He's using the wrong combinations. Imagine having 20,000 fans in Madison Square Garden watching what the coach is doing wrong live in real time. So there is a move using all of these approaches to give the fans more information to make them a bigger pain in the neck, but we love them, okay?
Not just going after the coach or the refs. I mean, I was struck during the NBA Finals, you could go onto Twitter and find a half dozen to a dozen folks who were doing the broadcast live in their own homes, which you could then play over turn down the volume on your television and listen to 2 guys talk about the game instead of Mark Jackson and Stan Van Gundy.
That's the model for sportscaster.
Selection, having multiple
options. That's the
options.
ability of saying that I don't want to listen to, you go on Facebook where the various people have announced, I'm calling this game.
Yeah.
And then you're going to get the opportunity with the Sportscaster app to listen to the game with someone who you really like.
Yeah.
The big improvement there is going to be, once you can do that, imagine doing the games in different languages, and you're going to have the ability to spread the game even more.
Sure.
So I think that the growth we're not in a bubble. We're in a serious growth phase, but there's going to be a lot of competition.
When you watch, if you watch the Dota 2 International, there's I think 9 broadcasts you can choose from. You can choose like a noob one if you don't know that much about the sports. You can choose a Russian one. You can choose any of those right literally on the screen. Yeah. You don't even need a kind of third party.
And when you think about all of the leagues, the NBA, NHL, NFL, and Major League Baseball, with their streaming services on a global basis, it's going to increase the number of viewers who are watching those streaming services. Yeah. And so they can get 1,200 games in the NBA or 2,400 with Major League Baseball and so on. So it's really, I think it's in some ways very much a golden age for sports, particularly in the digital and in the international.
VR, AR. Dan, tell me your thoughts about fact and fiction with regard to the development of virtual reality, augmented reality. I was at a presentation with Mark Tatum, a deputy commissioner at the NBA, who was talking about the idea of in Star Wars, where they had the chessboard on the Millennium Falcon, having that equivalent for an NBA game, where you would have sort of this 3-dimensional court where you could watch the players and manipulate the court to get the perspective. That doesn't feel like it's coming tomorrow, but are you bullish on the idea of this being the way?
I I think that it was interesting because yesterday I was reading about a company that I had led an investment in that was a VR company, and what they were talking about was their new AR product.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this was like the biggest VR evangelist, and now he's talking about something else. And I think in a way because the headset is still tough, but we're used to looking through our phone to create that AR experience. And so I think that, and a lot of people are holding up a phone anyway at a concert or a sports event and stuff like that. So I do think that there's a lot of potential. I think as humans, we max out on the amount of information, additional statistics, and everything else we want to see. But the idea, and I've been to Magic Leap and I've seen the things move, and I've shot somebody with my finger and seen bullets come out, which is real. So I do think there's a lot of potential there, but I think in a lot of these, what ends up happening is that they're very top down. So a bunch of people decide this is what people want to see and experience, and they push it down the pipeline. And in the reality, what ends up working is usually people adapting it to kind of figure out how they want to use it themselves, and then coming up the pipeline. So I don't know, when you go out and you do a ton of VR deals and you start with like huge rights deals and everything else and push it to people, it may be what they want, it may not. But again, esports is an example where it becomes so organic from the ground up that then you can build around that to some extent. And even in our thing, in focusing on high school and these young athletes, it's you're building on something that's happening organically rather than saying, hey, I found something and I'm going to present it to you now.
I must say that, I have my appointment. I'll get for Magic Leap, I got to sign the NDA.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like 20 NDAs.
Right. But B, I don't know when is the information too much?
Yeah.
There was a lead article in yesterday's New York Times talking about the installation by Major League Baseball Advanced Media of practically radar devices in every stadium. So you can actually know the velocity or the projected velocity coming off the bat and the speed.
Right.
Okay, after you know that, I'm not sure what you do with it. And every league has its own data analysis, their own wearable technology.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the interesting thing about wearable technology goes to health, conditioning, helping repair injuries, so to speak.
Yeah.
And to the teams, the data, it starts with the data of just statistics and then goes to some other things as you try to improve performance and the like, or make judgments about how good players are and whether you should draft them or trade for them, et cetera. But all these other statistics, I think there's going to be a statistic overload for the teams themselves, and then for the fans, my goodness, it'll be a very select few that have the capacity.
Do you think that teams will be okay, and will leagues want to share wearable technology data? Like, will we be watching the screen saying, wow, Kevin Love's heart rate is really up there, he needs to come out?
I tell you what, I often, the brave new world to me is there's a coach sitting in another room with his headset on the screen, and he tells the assistant coach on the bench, listen, not only is his heart rate up, his blood pressure is down, his lactic acid is congealing, and the facial recognition says he doesn't want to be there. The Yankees. Okay, I mean, it's kind of interesting to know how far it's going to go.
Yeah.
There's one. I agree with the commissioner in the sense like he's throwing 98 miles an hour. He's throwing 96 miles an hour. To me, it's like the same thing over and over again. There is one use case when all of that changes, and I'm not advocating pro or against it, but it's betting. And so they say in many parts of the country, if there are two raindrops rolling down the window, people will bet on which one gets to the bottom first. And so if you're saying, the next 5 pitches, how many are going to be over 95 miles an hour? Then all of a sudden you care. And so there are opportunities for that data in that sense to create essentially games around them.
Cheapening the conversation.
Yeah, well, but
No, actually, that's huge.
No, it's-
A picture, when people could actually make proposition bets on their phone.
Absolutely, in real
That
time.
makes the game live and interesting from
Sure.
beginning to end for particular viewers.
But also that data source is a potential revenue source for leagues, is it not? That they could potentially partner with a gaming company to like distribute information to them? That would be of real
I
interest
have no doubt that there will be a organic growth of companies that
Yeah.
that do it. They do it now, actually.
Yeah.
I never look at them, but they're out there telling would-be bettors who would, if they don't live in Las Vegas or they're not locally there,
Yeah.
are illegally doing something.
Sure.
But it's coming.
Yeah.
Because if it's true that Las Vegas's handle is $4 billion and the illegal betting is $100 billion,
Yeah.
if it were legal, I would bet that the states want that revenue.
Of course,
And it's coming.
I have to ask you, since it's a hot topic, the idea of resting players, and we know all the sort of biometric, or we know more biometric information about how players benefit from rest. And this is not just an NBA thing, but across leagues about the idea of maybe condensing schedules, cutting games. There's some idiot in the Wall Street Journal wrote today about 7-inning baseball. Do you think that's a valid conversation to have?
I think that technology actually will contribute to that conversation because there's wearable technology that talks about rest and regeneration. And therefore, if you ran a marathon, it would say, you better lie down for the next week. But if LeBron ran a marathon, it would
Do it
say
tomorrow.
he can run another one tomorrow. And that may give some quantification
Yeah.
to this whole debate because there's a part of it that has a different potential agenda. I don't want to show too much when I go into this building.
Right.
Well, you did that to me, so I'm going to do it back to you.
Right.
But the idea of starting the season earlier and ending it later so that there are fewer back-to-backs and 4 out of 5s is a great idea, and I know that Commissioner Silver is following that path. So I think that's good, and I think you're going to give less excuses for teams to be resting their players. And it's a dilemma because if you've got an Eastern team coming in for one visit to a Western city,
Yeah.
and dad and mom and the kids are making it into an event to see player X, you get there and player X
Right.
is not playing. And the coach doesn't even say, player X, go out there, run around a little bit.
Yeah.
We're not going to overtax you in this game.
Right.
It leaves a bad taste, I think, in the mouths of fans.
Sure. Dan, do legacy sports need to be less sacred about some of their traditions, i.e. with regard to scheduling and some of the things in terms of just being more aggressive towards millennial audiences?
I would say, the history of all things that are successful is that they tend to change and incrementally over time. I think that certainly, talk a lot about, people of a certain generation. It's not just that they're cutting the quarter watching less sports, like they could be watching other stuff. Like there's never been more competition for their time. So you could say, oh, nobody's watching the NFL. It could have as much to do with Game of Thrones or a new patch in League of Legends or anything else like that as it could with the game itself. And so I do think in a way they evolve. And even what we see, when we're covering some of the best players and some of the funnest events, like nobody wants to sit through a 45-minute live stream of the entire event. They want to understand what's there, and I'd say a quarter of that is they want to see people in the stands going like this and going like this and jumping off the things.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, it's physical competition, but it's just another form of entertainment. And
We're enabling fans to watch us less. And that's okay, seriously.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're an NBA fan, and that's a good thing, being an NBA fan, but if you would like to, in effect, go online and have a bot tell you what Steph Curry just did in the first period, then you're going to have to make a decision. Do I have to watch it, or can I just go on and be told and get a highlight tape virtually live?
Right.
And that's what the league does for its fans now, and that's a good thing. Some fans, it'll make them more interested and bring them to the game. Others will say, well, maybe I can just stop in from time to time or peek in to see how it's going. And that's an interesting dilemma.
Sure.
For sure. I mean, if you think about fantasy football, which I think was the first thing to really disaggregate players from teams and people following local entities, and all of a sudden you're trying to keep up on some wide receiver for a city and a team that you do not care about.
Why am I watching the Jaguars?
Exactly. Or, well, whomever. But then you've got the red zone, and now you're on Instagram, and now you're trying to basically piecemeal it through yourself. And so, look, I love podcasts. I love them so much I have to listen to them at 2x speed to be able to consume all the ones that I want to consume. So you have all of this, so you're trying to find ways to kind of give people as much as they want to consume, in different formats.
It's a dilemma because you wind up, giving your fans, let's say in the NFL's case, you can watch the game.
Yeah.
You can watch the red zone.
Yeah.
You can watch. There were two different ones that I get on my Direct TV: the red zone and the help me out.
There's like a Statcaster or something like
The
that.
red, white, and blue zone.
Yeah, that's right. The red, white, and blue. Right. And so the big problem with that is maybe in the next round of negotiations, if ratings are flat or down a bit, the broadcasters will be tempted to say, "Well, let's
cannibalizing.
You're cannibalizing my product."
Yeah.
And if I'm a game, and suddenly the same game is on, the NFL Network and Amazon.
Yeah.
And not Red Zone, because that wouldn't be that's for a Sunday, but it's. We're all treading you can slice the salami up to a point, and then it's inedible.
I mean, one way, because I like mobile and I like product, one way to think about that at the very micro level is if you ever watch somebody consume Snapchat content, like the user has the power to tap and go faster, or not. And so I might watch the NBA's account or somebody else's account on Snapchat, and I'm watching, I'm like, I don't care about that, that I want to watch, that I don't want to watch. And all of a sudden, I've taken something that's 3 minutes and I've had complete control to watch it in 15 seconds or 3 minutes in some way or other. So we're allowing people to kind of hone in on the elements that they want.
And it goes without saying, the metrics haven't caught up to the way these things are measured, and we're still using a lot of antiquated technology to sort of judge.
That is correct. Because if you sit here and listen, and you talk about the 15-second push ahead on Snapchat, and then you talk about all the other sports options that are coming online.
Yeah.
It's a crowded marketplace, and you're going to have to be careful.
I know we have a few minutes left, and we'd like to open it up to audience members if they had questions. I believe there are microphones set up, or you can just scream if somebody wants to ask a question. Yes, sir.
FanDuel, DraftKings, antitrust. Will it just go away, or will they appear in a new form, a new life form?
There are so many potential fantasy competitors that are out there already operating and the like, both for the standard daily fantasy and for a whole slew of proposition bets like WinView, and the other one is Boom.
I'm an investor in Boom.
Boom Shakalaka, what's its original name, but and they're all like, it's a good idea that you shortened it there. I think the government is overreacting. I think right now the two giants have been humbled. They are losing money, or maybe they're making a little bit, but nothing like they were projecting. So I don't understand. And there are so many others coming in. It seems like a waste of time. But I think that the entire activity in fantasy was a waste of time because the Attorney General comes in and says, my God, this is betting. And then they says, it's betting, really. But it's not betting because 3% of the players win 95% of the money, so it's clearly a game of skill. Well, but it's betting, but you should warn people that they can lose all their money because it's not betting. It's just a game of skill, and they can't possibly compete with the quants. So we're having difficulty adjusting to the reality of what fantasy is.
Meanwhile, you can go into the stock market and make bets that are basically the same thing, and it's completely legal. So
there's a question over here.
Do you view the Big Three as a competitor or a supplement to NBA?
Supplement.
This is the new 3-on-3 league.
No, because it's clear that the powers that be in basketball, like FIBA, the global organization and federation, just got 3x3, in effect, into the Olympics for 2020. That's a good thing because you're now going to have two basketball events. It's a little bit like volleyball and beach volleyball. And so I think that anything that it keeps our players in the public eye. Can AI still do the crossover? It's just kind of, as a fan, I'm interested in that. I think it's a good idea that what the Big Three is doing, but they're preparing the television event after the fact so they can do a little editing. Because my guess is that not every game is going to be perfect. And this way they can shorten it and put it onto FS1.
We're a team, by the way. David's the point guard. Yeah. Anybody else out there? There's a question over here.
How can we keep the WNBA competitive, and what direction do you see it going in for the next few years?
Keeping the WNBA competitive, and where do you see it going?
It is competitive. It's a great product. John Wooden, coach, said it's the best basketball he's seen because they play it the way it should be played. And 20 years later, I guess those media types that were busy predicting its doom 20 years ago, and then 19 years ago, and then 18 years ago, were wrong. And I think you're going to see expansion over the next course of the next 5 years.
In terms of broadcasting, we know it's a great product, but as far as it being seen everywhere.
It's on ESPN too, on a regular basis. It's on NBA TV. It streams on WNBA streaming. There's plenty out there, and there's going to be probably more. And I think that as generations grow up, right now the WNBA is more seen than the NBA was 20 years into it. I can tell you that. And, their championship was not shown on tape delay the way the NBA's was in 1981. And that was a league that started in 46, 47. So I think that you're not giving the WNBA enough credit for what it has right now.
We have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
You mentioned earlier, Mr. Commissioner, that there's so many products right now on the market, and viewers are switching between the different channels very quickly. Don't you think that it's because there's a bit of saturation right now? You have the Big Three, you have NBA, WNBA, FIBA basketball, and so on?
The amount of time that people are spending in front of the TV set keeps going up, which is fascinating. And you're right about the pressures, but I don't think that it's, quote, oversaturation. It's just about competition. And so sports are going to have to work harder to be seen and to be appreciated. And that really is going to consumer experience. that PwC report I mentioned earlier talks about we're moving into an era where the consumer experience and the interaction doesn't work if you're just doing it the old-fashioned way. And so the leagues are all adapting, whether it is the extra information that fans are getting, if it is, whether it's the second screen or the first screen expanded. There's going to be a lot of competition to get people to watch the sports. It's a fair issue, but it was, I come from a background where, well, hell, it used to be tape delayed, so this is a nice product to have and a nice problem to have, that it's now must-see TV. That in a day like this year, the NBA Finals just got the highest rating in the history of ABC. So, and by the way, that's where most of the revenue comes from for the networks, the playoffs and the final.
Right.
If, I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but you can see that there's the regular season on television, and then there's the playoffs and finals. And the regular season is something that the true fans can't get enough of, but the casual viewer gets pulled in during the heightened activity. And that's just the way it is. And you're going to find the sports leagues struggling to make sure the millennials stay tuned.
Yeah, I think it's about expanding the market. To your point, if there's 150 million fans, it means there's 150 million non-fans. So for the hardcore fan, they're going to get saturated. But for the person who goes on Facebook and sees Aisha Curry and she's cute and gets sucked into a story and all of a sudden becomes a fan, I think whether we're in our high school or esports and any of these things, there's still a ton of opportunity to expand the audience.
I believe
for the biggest sports.
I believe tonight the NBA is having its awards ceremony. They're naming their MVP over here in the West Side.
Yes, they are. And actually, I spoke with Bill Russell because yesterday he's receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award.
It's a good candidate.
Which is a great candidate. He's getting the first one. So that's right. There's an award show on TNT, everybody. It's 9 p.m. tonight on TNT, and it's yet another opportunity to, and who would have thought, I guess to the gentleman's question, that an NBA draft, which years ago was a conference call, and then in a hotel room someplace, and I was sitting with a gentleman, now deceased, Bob Wessler, one day during the draft. He said, "This is a primetime product." I said, "Okay, we agree." And so suddenly the draft was on TNT, and it gets, a 2.7 rating.
Yeah.
Watching somebody come to the podium and say the next pick in the blah, 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 and that's what the sports leagues are doing. And the NHL did an award show at the same time as their entry draft.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great stuff. Everything is a TV event, tries to increase interest, tries to keep fans involved, and tries to get personal with the fans as well.
We'll give the commissioner the last word. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Thanks for having us.